We are all working on the on ensuring that there is a clear signal that would take Ukraine-NATO relationship to a new stage, a new level. Ideally, it would be an invitation for Ukraine to join NATO by very serious engagement in negotiations on different levels. And I think here we should not be looking for plan B. This is not Putin's war against Ukraine. This is Russian war against Ukraine. And Russia will never, ever again try to attack any of the NATO members.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center, and I'm your host, Matt Wickham. In this episode, we'll talk about the upcoming NATO summit in Vilnius with Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze, former Vice Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration of Ukraine, MP of Ukraine, and a board member to UCMC. If you want to learn more about this subject, please continue watching this video and don't forget to press subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any of our videos in the future. With the upcoming NATO summit set to take place in Vilnius on Tuesday, July the 11th and Wednesday, July the 12th, all eyes are on what NATO will propose to Ukraine and what signal of unity will be sent to Russia. Zelensky has stated we need clear and understandable signals. But what about Ivanna? What expectations has she got for the upcoming summit? She spoke to Ukraine in Flames exclusively to find out. Let's take a listen.
Let's talk a little bit about NATO. So Ukraine's bid for NATO membership now. So Ukraine has stated that the upcoming NATO summit will provide a signal, a clear invitation that will solidify its path to NATO membership. What are your expectations and goals from the NATO summit in July? And what are these clear signals that we're expecting?
Let's say this way, we are all working on the on ensuring that there is a clear signal that would take Ukraine-NATO relationship to a new stage, a new level, beyond the language that was adopted in 2008 in Bucharest summit, which I actually believe was a huge mistake by NATO when there was a decision made that Georgia and Ukraine will become NATO members, and the next step on this path will be providing them membership action plan. That never materialized, and I think that that particular non-readiness at that point already grant Ukraine and Georgia a map has led Vladimir Putin and Kremlin Russia to attack first Georgia, then attack Ukraine in 2014, and then continue on to this full-scale invasion in 2022 on Ukraine. So right now, I think it's time to ensure that additional, even more drastic and more dramatic mistake is not being done by NATO again. And that would mean that NATO would have to be ready to take some step that would clearly state that Ukraine is already on the path towards membership. Ideally, it would be an invitation for Ukraine to join NATO, maybe after the end of this war, because we understand that nobody in the alliance is ready to send troops to Ukraine, and that's not exactly what we are asking at this particular moment. We are asking for further backing with the military support, with humanitarian, economic support, with further pressure on the Russian Federation. And however, I think that there is no consensus at this particular moment to actually state this invitation, even after the end of the war. And so, therefore, that has to be a language that would clearly define the path that Ukraine could follow and NATO would accept for Ukraine to join NATO in the future. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we would ideally want to see the path that is similar to what Finland has already successfully gone through, and Sweden is still continuing on the way, with two countries still to having to ratify their agreement on NATO membership. But in the meantime, they have the guarantees from one of the nuclear powers, NATO members, Britain, and they are basically being protected by those security guarantees. I think that first, we would have to hear from NATO what are those steps that they foresee for Ukraine. And also, I think we here inside the country also know what are particular additional reforms that we would have to work on. And I think that this is, this has been clear for some years already by now. It's about the reform of the security service. It's about the reform of the implementing additional civilian parliamentary control over the armed forces and over the security sector. I mean, it's pretty clear these are politically important things that are operating in the democratic countries. So I think that we would have to focus on this internally, but at the same time expect that not only Ukraine NATO Commission is being upgraded to a new status of some privileged cooperation under the Ukraine NATO Council hat, as it was actually with the Russian Federation. We are not interested in that type of a relationship. We are interested in the integration relationship. So I think, the Council, the additional, the additional resources and additional instruments within CAP, within comprehensive assistance package for Ukraine, would have to be also backed by a clear political language that would state that we are ready. And I think what's most important here is that we need to ensure that NATO nations stop being afraid of Russia's response to such a decision. I think this is the most critical thing that has to happen, because we still see this caution. We still see some of the nations being kind of watching over what Russia will say, even though they would never admit that Russia has anything to say with regard to NATO further enlargement or additional members being invited to the alliance.
How do we do that then? So we've seen over the last few months, especially over the last year, the UK kind of standing up to Russia in its aggression, being the first to kind of provide all the arms and the next kind of next step of arms to Ukraine. How does Ukraine push member states of NATO to be a little bit braver and not to fall for Russia's propaganda of fear?
Both by example and also by very serious engagement in negotiations on different levels. Obviously, working with the societies, addressing these issues in the media, also working with the political elites from different political parties, because it's not only the majority parties that are taking the decisions. Sometimes you are reaching out also to those who are at this particular moment in opposition. Tomorrow they will be in the government, and that is kind of work on wider consensus inside each nation on why this is important for them, providing them with the instruments, why it is for the benefit of each nation inside NATO that Ukraine in the future will have to be part of the alliance. It should not be left in the gray zone. If Ukraine, even after victory in this war, even after Russia being defeated in this war, will remain outside of the security, Euro-Atlantic Security Alliance, that will only indulge additional appetites for Russia to regain its strength and to attack again. If it sees the response in unity, in strength, and in the kind of common effort of a wider alliance, Russia will back up. And Russia will never, ever again try to attack any of the NATO members.
Two quick questions for you here. So we're saying here that if Ukraine stays in the grey zone, it will still be under threat of Russia in the future. How long is Ukraine willing to wait to hear these signals from NATO if it's going to join the alliance? Because obviously at the early months of the war, we were hearing about UK, Polish, Ukraine alliance, which was was a possibility if Ukraine wouldn't go into NATO. How long is Ukraine willing to wait before it starts making its own kind of alliances with its partners?
I do belong to those Euro-Atlanticists who do not believe in any other ways beyond Ukraine joining NATO. And I think that we also have to focus on one goal. And I think here we should not be looking for a plan B. I think that this is incredibly important. When you know that you only have a plan A, you then mobilize your resources much more efficiently and are more persuasive and are then, I think, also reaching the desired result, as it was, for example, when everybody from the president of Ukraine to the government members to the parliamentary representatives of different political forces and the civil society all worked towards the goal of achieving candidate status in the EU. That's something very, very similar. If we all unite our forces and if we work also in concert with our partners that are sincerely, if I may, lobbying in the inside of the alliance, the future Ukraine's membership, I think we will definitely succeed.
Okay, last question for you here. So on global support, a year ago, you were urging partners to strengthen sanctions against Russia to ensure they reach an impact not only for Putin's circle of elites, but every ordinary kind of everyday Russians. Was this achieved by the West? And what more has to be done on the sanctions front?
Well, I think we are still not there yet with clear understanding among the free world nations that this is not Putin's war against Ukraine. This is Russian war against Ukraine. And every single Russian citizen has to bear the consequences and the responsibility for this war in the future. And also they will have to pay the reparations in the future. They will have to ask for forgiveness and maybe at some point be forgiven. But we are very, very far from this stage, this particular moment. So, but this is incredibly important to understand that it's not that we are talking about only decision of a group of people that has decided to start this war, because we see that more or less 80% of the Russian population still continuously support this so-called special operation against Ukrainian citizens, but which is actual genocidal war against Ukrainian nation and Ukrainian state. So with regard to sanctions, well, I'm glad that right now the European Union has approved the 11th package of sanctions, but this one in particular is more focused on closing the loopholes on other ones. And I think that we still have to ensure that all the control mechanisms on ensuring that dual-use goods are not being sold to Russia are prevented from getting into Russian Federation, because they are using them to create additional weaponry, to kill Ukrainians, to kill and destroy our cities, and to conduct these brutal atrocities on our land. And so this is good that it has been done. The decision has been taken. But at the same time, I think it's important to go on to another level of, for example, sanctioning the Russian Rosatom and all the daughter companies of this particular institution, and go out after the nuclear energy sector of the Russian Federation. I think a lot can be done still in this particular realm. I think still there are other additional, even personal sanctions, even specific business sanctions that can be further imposed on the Russian Federation that could bear fruit. And we see how difficult the the latest conversations are ongoing inside of the EU, and we see that some of the states on different stages of this sanction packages have been trying to ensure that they are getting their own privileges for themselves, and have been trying to weaken each package. And unfortunately, Hungary is exemplary in a negative way in this particular sense. Yes, they have been at the end agreeing with each package of the sanctions, but always also succeeding in weakening each of them in comparison to what was planned initially. So I think it's also about a very sincere and very honest conversation that has to happen inside the EU and inside the community of free nations about whether the countries that are enjoying the benefits of the free world and enjoying the benefits of being part of the unions that are creating additional opportunities for their nations, whether they can at the same time work on undermining this basic values of these institutions, of these unions, of these communities. And I think with the latest statement of today of Mr. Orban, Prime Minister of Hungary, who has questioned the sovereignty of Ukraine as a sovereign nation, I think additional kind of wave of dissatisfaction, I'll be trying to use the diplomatic language here, will be seen also both from Ukraine, but also from many of our partners towards the leader of the nation that is at this particular moment enjoying the possibility of having the free life because Ukrainians are dying in order to protect both themselves, but also members of the Union, of the EU and NATO unions.
You've been watching the special project by Ukraine Media Center dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. In the description under this video, you can find information on how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you find our work useful, please like and share this video. Slava Ukraini!